Here we go.
So welcome. We're going to talk about early intervention today. So I've been working for Las Cumbres, which is the early intervention provider for Los Alamos County. I've been working there for about 5 years, a little over 5 years now, 5.5 years. And I got into working for Las Cumbres because 3 of my 4 children went through the early intervention process. They received services through Las Cumbres, and I was so thrilled with it. And I learned so much about it. In my previous life, I was a social worker and worked with teenagers. And so now I work with what I know really well, which is development, and I get very excited about it. The thing I really like about New Mexico is they do a great job with early intervention. All services are free. Anything that is not covered by insurance is covered by the state, which is amazing. It's not like that in all states. So that's actually a great thing. And a lot of parents ask me, when should I call? When should I make a referral? Do I have to go to the doctor for a referral? Nope, you do not have to go to the doctor for a referral. All you need to do is look up our phone number, go on our website, and you can make your own referral for your child. And the time to call is anytime you have a question. If you have a question, because with my oldest, I asked a lot of questions. I said, are you sure this is normal? Maybe we should have it, like, is his speech is really slow coming in. Is that an issue? And I got a lot of, well, wait and see. Wait and see, wait and see. And I hate that now. I am not a fan of wait and see. Don't wait and see, because the early intervention, we cover ages 0 to 3. And after age 3, the school district takes over. And so if there are concerns after 3. Now, in that 0 to 3 window, kids only have to have a 25% delay in any developmental area to qualify for services, which is amazing. And also, if they don't qualify, but there are some quality concerns about development, we can still qualify them. We actually are pretty flexible in early intervention about qualifying kids, which is awesome. And so even if it's a concern, not necessarily about what they're doing, but how they're doing it. So yeah, they can sit up, but they're sitting up in an atypical way. Then, oh yeah, maybe we need to look at that, address it. Sometimes we'll just even say, okay, they're actually on a good trajectory. Here are some ideas to work with them. Now, the whole intake process is a little laborious, I feel like. And I've even told the up and ups at the, in early intervention at the FIT program, the Family Infant Toddler program. I even say, you're just creating hoops for parents to jump through, that they just want to get their kids evaluated and get help for their kids. And you're creating all these hoops that parents have to jump through. It's a little laborious to jump through those hoops to go through the whole process, but it's totally worth it. But also, if you do just have questions and whether or not you should pursue services, we're happy to talk to you. Even if you just want to contact me on Facebook, I'm on Facebook. I'm happy to answer any developmental questions. 3 of my 4 kids ended up being diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So that's another thing that we look at in early intervention. It's not something we do testing for, but we definitely look for those red flags. And it's something that I always recommend waiting for that testing, those questions, until they're a little older. But we're definitely, we tend to focus on skill development in early intervention, which applies to any concerns. So say you have a kid with a diagnosis, we're still going to work on skill development. We're going to work on sitting up, rolling over, development of language skills. So all those skills that we're working on, we're going to work on those skill developments. And does anybody have any questions about early intervention? Specifically? I can talk forever. I really can. So I can like jump in on like whatever you want. Like, do you want me to focus on like speech development? Or so let's talk about gross motor development, since we actually had a workshop a couple weeks ago about gross motor development. Gross motor refers to walking, rolling, sitting, crawling, standing, all the large muscles. So all these, big muscles, gross motor. So the type, and what's hard with gross motor is there's such a range of what we consider typical, like normal, like what's the range of normal. A lot of people think they need to be crawling at 6 months and walking by a year. No. For walking, the range from 9 months to 18 months is considered within the range of typical. So it's difficult to say whether or not there's any concerns during that time. Now there could be, because 18 months is when we say that's pretty late. It's pretty late to be walking. It's if they're consistently getting, moving through other skills. If they're consistently making progress, it's not so much of a worry. If they're looking a little atypical, like instead of doing a 4-point crawl, which is hands and knees, the typical 4-point crawl, they're maybe doing a scoot, or they're doing an army crawl, and they're not doing those typical skills. They're not developing those skills and progressing through those skills and how they're standing up and how they're doing it. So there might be an underlying concern. A lot of times kids, they do what's easy for them. They're going to progress in a way that is easy for them. Some kids, rolling was really easy. Why would I crawl? I can get everywhere I want by rolling. There's no need for me to crawl. Or crawling is easy. Why would I need to walk? I can get places that I need to get to crawling. I don't need to walk. So a lot of times personality comes into it and what's easy for them. And so I always like to say, like, in those cases, we just like to nudge them in the right direction. So that's like gross motor concerns. Speech development, interesting thing about speech and gross motor, they typically don't develop at the same time. Sometimes you'll have a kid who's like talking in complete sentences, but they're just not walking yet because they're concentrating on this. Or you'll have a kid who is, I want to get around, I want to do things and destroy your house. And talking isn't super important to me. So I'm just going to hang back on that development. So you'll see that sometimes. And I know like, typically that's like, you have the wild boys. Like, it doesn't always have to be a gender thing because I was a wild girl. So you never know. So, but with my boys, like it was destroy all the things, break all the things. So they were go, 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 and their speech sort of lagged behind. So that's, so with speech. And so a lot of times with speech, if you're not seeing words before at about 18 months, you should have, mom and dad and maybe a few other words to get your way. A lot of times you'll hear no. No is a great word, but we get tired of hearing it as parents, but it's such a wonderful communication word. So that's you want to see those. If they don't have any words by 18 months, by 2 years, you're going to want to call. That's a little late to not have that communication. And there's a difference between receptive language and expressive language. Receptive language is everything you take in, what you're receiving, what you're understanding. So that receptive language, how much does the child understand? Are they able to follow directions? Are they able to do what you ask them to do? Or do they just sort of stare at you like, because a lot of times we don't know, but we're giving clues every time we ask a child to do something. Like if you hand a child a diaper after a diaper change and say, go throw this in the garbage, they know that's part of a routine. Do they actually understand the words? We don't know because it's part of a routine. So I always tell parents if they want to check their children's receptive language, to try to ask them to do something without any gestures, which is super unnatural. It feels super weird to do that. To ask them to do something without giving them any clues, without handing them anything. That's how you can check their receptive language, what they're receiving and what they're understanding. Expressive language is what they're getting out. And a lot of times that's what kids struggle with, is getting things out and organizing their thoughts and then organizing it into a sound and then expressing that to communicate what they need. And that's a lot of things to work through and a lot of things to organize. And it takes practice. One of the best ways to work on expressive language is music. I love doing it with music. And actually, music is great for language, expressive, receptive, either way. Things like Wheels on the Bus. I always love these because I'm like, parents are already doing it with their kids. They don't even know that they're already building on, like, they're doing this like language development without even knowing. Wheels on the Bus. What does that do? Round and round. They're putting an action with a word. And so putting those two together identifies that word for a kid. So they know what it is. The doors, they open and shut. So they know what the doors are. So all those, like, any song that has actions, Itsy Bitsy Spider, Baby Shark. I always hate to like tell parents that, but Baby Shark is such a great developmental song because they do the baby shark and they do the mommy shark and they do the daddy shark. And so all those are actually really great development songs. Old Macdonald, wonderful one because you can have the pictures of the animals. So those are really great language development. Another one I really like to use for kids is I give parents this advice when singing songs is to leave off the last word. And I know people sing ABCs to their kids all the time. I don't know if you do. I did. ABC, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, all these songs, songs that kids know are really great. And so if you leave off that last word or pause before you give it to them, like if you're singing, I can't believe I'm going to sing, you're recording this. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. As I sang that, your brain filled in star. As I sang it, your brain filled it in because it's like, wait, where's that word? So it happens to kids too, especially with songs they're familiar with. So you can do it with the ABC song, which is incidentally the same song as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Sing it to yourselves. You realize it's the same song. Super weird. But if you leave off that last, or even just pause before you give them that last letter or word, their brain will fill it in. And that's actually great for brain development and for language development. And then let's see, what's other language stuff I love to do? Dialoguing. Dialoguing, I tell parents to dialogue all the time. And dialoguing is talking through your day. And this might feel really unnatural to some people. Me, I'm a talker. I can talk all day long. And actually it was really weird when I had a baby and I was staying home with a baby to not have anyone to talk to all day. And so I would talk through my day, not recognizing that this was actually good for language development. I'm putting your socks on. I'm taking your socks off. We're changing your diaper on, diaper off. It sounds like, and so all this, like simplifying it and making it a dialogue through your day actually really solidifies those words with a routine. So dialoguing for kids, they're hearing your voice, they're hearing the words, they're hearing what the words are associated with as part of a routine. And so those are actually really great ways to introduce language to kids. It's something that feels really unnatural for some people if they've never done it before, if they're not like, I'm not a talker. I feel really weird talking to someone who doesn't really understand me, like with a baby. But it's actually, it feels really strange. And I actually found myself doing it even when like my babies weren't at home. Like if someone was watching my kids, I found myself dialoguing and realized I am talking to myself. This is awesome. And I don't know if we've all done it where you're like, oh, look, a fire engine. Oh, there's no kids in my car. Because you get into these habits of doing things. So those are language. I don't know how long you want me to go, Leslie, because I can go forever, just so you know.
We have time. I'm looking at your, keep going for a little while. If anyone has questions, throw them out there. With that dialoguing, man, oh my gosh, my kid, so my boys are, it's not that they didn't talk, it's that no one could understand them. Their articulation was the problem. And so going through dialoguing, my 5-year-old correctly uses the word literally and actually, and only because he just has mimicked everything that I say. And he's the only 5-year-old I know who literally uses literally correctly.
I love it. That's so much fun. Yeah, because it's the stuff they hear, and then they regurgitate that out. Which is why some kids use bad words, because they hear their mommies do it. I actually told the school,
totally not my fault at all when they do that. Totally not my fault.
Mine's the word crap. Like I finally just told the school, I'm like, I use that word all the time. I don't consider it a bad word, and I'm never gonna stop using it, and I can't get mad at my kids for using it. So I'm like, I can't. Like, we don't use the other naughty words. We're pretty strict about that at home, but we try. But another thing I like to touch on is something that I was unfamiliar with when my children started services. Eating. Yes, I'd love to talk about normal eating development. I could talk about all the things. So what ages are we talking about in terms of eating? Two to three? Okay, so like picky eaters. So a lot of times there's a stage where kids decide what they like and what they don't like. And if you think about it, so a lot of this stuff, if you have a child who you would sort of call a picky eater, a lot of times that's related to sensory stuff, which I kind of wanted to touch on. And we're actually doing a workshop tomorrow on sensory play and understanding senses, which is really fascinating. So a lot of kids, they might not like certain textures or certain flavors. They might have a very limited diet. When I would call it concerning from ages 2 to 3. Sensitive gag reflexes. Those are tough. Oof. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about sensory. So a lot of the stuff with sensory stuff is it could be certain textures, certain things, and they'll have a very limited diet. I would say at the ages of 2 to 3, something that would be concerning would be under 10 foods that they eat, like specific foods, and they're very limited and very specific in their the foods that they will eat. My son at 3 had 5 foods he would eat. And to put your mind a little bit at rest, my son will now eat coconut curry. He will eat Indian food that I give him. He will eat basically anything, but he still has some foods that he does not want to eat that are texture-wise not something he likes. I've never had to deal with a severe gag reflex. That it's honestly something that I'm like, oh, that's such a hard struggle, especially if they have such a limited diet. It's a lot of times related to textures. And you kind of have to tweak recipes and figure out what works and what doesn't, what they can, smaller bites, whether or not like yogurt. A lot of times kids will really like yogurt, but they can't stand to have the chunks in, and those chunks will trigger that gag reflex. And because it's something, unexpected. So a lot of times it's if there's chunks in things. So like if you could do rice, but don't put peas in the rice because that's a different texture and that can trigger the gag reflex. So it would be like different textures. And it's trial and error because every kid is different and every kid has different sensory needs. Just like us as adults. I always like to tie it into us as adults. We all have sensory eating. It's okay. With meat. Okay. Oh, that's rough. A severe gag reflex. So she's a great eater and will try anything, but has problems with meat. So it can be triggered even by things she loves normally and has no problems with regularly. Honestly, that's one where I would say talk to the doctors, or a speech therapist who specializes in feeding. So we actually have a feeding specialist at Las Cumbres. We should do a workshop with her. She's awesome. And I was like, because we're planning all our workshops for the year. And so I'm like, we should get her to do a feeding workshop. So a lot of speech therapists have training in feeding. But we actually have one that is specifically a feeding specialist. And so she usually works with kids who have gag reflexes or sensory aversions to foods. So she'll work with that stuff, which is really amazing. And her name is Julie, and we love her. So that's actually, she's a really great resource. So give us a call. I can probably get her, like, I could probably ask her the questions you need. So, because I'm not a feeding specialist at all, but I did have someone who had like some significant feeding concerns. So sensory stuff. So us as adults, we each have sounds we don't like. Everybody hates nails on a chalkboard. That's pretty universal. But there will be sounds that you might not like personally. Like for me, I can't stand hearing other people eat. It drives me crazy. Like chewing with their mouth open. Oh, I want to say it to strangers. I want to be like, please keep your mouth closed when you're eating, because it is something that drives me crazy. Now, also things like we like certain textures, things that you like to touch. Like maybe as a kid, you didn't like tags on your shirts, or certain textures, like maybe you didn't want to wear shoes, or, you know, certain kinds of shoes. And even as adults, we can mitigate those issues, right? We have coping strategies. I hate crowds. I don't go to Disneyland during like the peak season because I can't, because you might not be able to stand all those crowds. Or you just might, you know, decide where to stand for the parades in town based on whether or not you can stand crowds, or whether or not you like to be in the sun or the shade. Some people really love being in the sun. Some people like having dark in their house darker. Like I have light blocking curtains. Some people can't stand it dark and they like to have every window open. So we as adults have sensory integration issues. Everyone does. But we know how to deal with those. Kids don't. They don't know how to, and they don't even a lot of times understand that it's their body reacting to a certain texture, sound, environment. All you'll see out of kids is tantrums. It'll be they're falling apart, or they're going to withdraw, or they're just going to, and so there's a lot of, you know, stuff around sensory, and that can affect, you know, feeding. It can affect learning in school. Like if a kid is overwhelmed by a lot of bright colors in the room, that's going to be overwhelming for them. They're going to have a hard time concentrating. And a lot of times that can look like ADHD when it's not, because they get distracted easily, not necessarily because it's an ADHD issue, but because they're overwhelmed with the sensory input that their body is receiving. Does that make sense? So but that comes into feeding as well. So different textures, different flavors might hit at the wrong time. It might just not be something they can tolerate. It might be something that you have to work at over the years, is introducing new textures and new flavors into a diet. Any other questions?
The only thing that I know for sure that you guys have that you haven't mentioned is fine motor skills development and OT. And I purely know that since, you know, Miss Camille was a fixture in our house for a good long while.
And Miss Camille is doing our sensory workshop tomorrow with me. And so we work on fine motor. So occupational therapists, so a physical therapist will work on gross motor skills. An occupational therapist concentrates on fine motor skills and sensory. So the fine motor skills, that's things like writing, coloring, puzzles. It could be hand-eye coordination. It could be, and a lot of times they'll actually look a lot about eye tracking, because that all plays into fine motor skills. Because if you're not seeing very well, or your eyes aren't tracking well, that plays into your fine motor skills if you can't see well. So that's a lot of times our occupational therapist will catch if we have a vision concern. Although we do vision, like a little checklist at the beginning. But so that's talking about, you know, puzzles and how to manipulate things, and how to like we work on stacking blocks. So when we do an evaluation, I actually have these right here because we did an evaluation this morning. We do things like block stacking. I think it's all my mess here. So we have the kids stack blocks and show us how they can. And this isn't just about, oh, my kid can stack blocks tall. It's about how they're holding the block. Are they holding the block like this? Are they holding the block like this? How are they? So this is quality is what we look at. Like, are they doing it this way and then holding it, doing a full hand release? Or are they able to do what's called, we call this a radial digital grasp of the block and put it on. And it's about, you know, control. It's about vision. It's about all these things. So a lot of times, you know, I joke that our evaluations are very block stacking heavy, like that's, but it's interesting how much just stacking blocks shows us about development. Another thing we look for as kids are older, this is actually a skill that kids don't learn anymore because it's not something that people have in their house anymore. And that's doing beads. And it's not just about being able to put the bead on. What we look for with kids is the visual of looking at the hole, putting it in the hole, and then being able to switch hands and then pull it out. So it's that switching hands actually that is pretty significant about the about stringing beads. That we're looking for that ability to switch hands, to cross, to do that midline coordination. And that's actually a higher skill. That's more like 2.5, 3 is where we're looking at that. You know, that's a later skill. It's not something I'd expect like a 1-year-old to do. If they can do that, I'd be extremely impressed. So I buy these in bulk because we're in COVID now, and I actually just drop these off at families' houses when we're doing an evaluation. So they get to keep them. Like, they can always practice.
You can always send them to FSN too, because I have at least 5 or 6 different stringing, lacing toys in the toy library.
I should just bring some over because I actually have so many more beads than I need. So, but I just buy the laces, and I bought these beads. I get them in bulk, and I just separate them into a little baggie with blocks and beads. And I drop them off when we're doing an evaluation, because we're doing evaluations over Zoom now. So if you're not comfortable doing face-to-face evaluation because you have a medical issue in your house, my son is medically fragile, so we're like super paranoid. So it's fine if you don't feel comfortable doing face-to-face. We are actually able to do face-to-face evaluations with one person. We have a space that we're borrowing from the school district. It's pretty sparse, but we're able to use a space up here in Los Alamos that we're borrowing. It's over by the school district office. And so that's another option if you aren't comfortable doing an evaluation, outside, because that's really our only other option. So we can do it at our little space we borrow. We can have one of us there and the other one attend by Zoom. But a lot of times these days we're doing Zoom evaluations through Zoom, which obviously involves parents getting their kids to complete tasks. But it's actually been working really well. And it's amazing because a lot of times, even when we're in front of them, face to face, the Zoom has actually been great because parents will put their phone or computer and they will point it directly at their hands. So we're actually able to see it really well. So it's been honestly, I'm surprised at how well it's worked, because I was skeptical at first. And I'm actually very surprised at the success we've had with Zoom. A lot of our therapy is actually parent coaching. So that's actually really forced us as interventionists to really rely heavily on parent coaching, which is, we're going to give you some ideas to incorporate into daily routines. And I hate calling it homework. I hate calling it therapy, because I don't feel like parents have time to take these 15 minutes and do this one task. I hate that. As a mom of kids who had developmental delays, I hated that. I like incorporating things as part of a routine. And that's actually what we try to do mostly. So if a kid's having, like, say, fine motor delays, one of my favorite activities for that is I say get some, if you have extras, throw them in the bathtub, some measuring cups. Kids love measuring cups. Measuring cups, throw them in the bathtub because that is pouring one into another. Those are all fine motor skills. My kids loved graduated cylinders. We happen to have some plastic graduated cylinders because, we're in Los Alamos and science and whatever. So, but just pouring from one graduated cylinder to another, my kids loved that activity. That was, and it's in the bath. It's not a mess. It's something you do anyway. It's just making it easier on mom.
Call it making potions, and they'll love it even more.
Yes, potions. Call it. Yeah, you're doing science. My kids loved it because it was science. Because I live in the Big Bang Theory, and I am the Penny of the Big Bang Theory in my house, and I'm okay with that. So, but even things like another activity in the bathtub, because I love bathtub because it's something you already do with your kids, and kids usually really like. If you're, working on oral motor stuff, blowing bubbles in the bathtub. Blowing bubbles in milk is really fun, and kids super love it because the milk goes to the top of the cup. It's very satisfying. But if you are like me and you can't stand the mess, blowing bubbles in the bathtub is great. Blowing with a straw. Just blow bubbles in the bathtub. Of course, they're going to drink the bath water. It's fine. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. And so, and also like just practice. If you want your kids to practice with an open cup, do it in the bathtub. You don't have to have them drink the bath water. If you're super worried about that, you can just fill up a glass, give it to them in the bathtub, and they can drink it. It's a great way to practice where you don't have to clean up the mess at the dinner table. Because when you have a lot of little kids, I had 4 under 5 because I'm insane. And just that mess was so stressful. Doing it in the bathtub is so easy, and they think it's fun. It's a game. So, and that's the thing about development is it really should just be play. Most of development is play. And as early interventionists, we really just want to give you little tweaks on that play to encourage development. Well, another one I use for parents that's part of a routine is when you're handing your child something. So this is what I use for gross motor a lot of times. When you're handing your child something, which muscles do you use? You put it in your hand and you have it, right? If you give a child something over their head, so if you lift your arms over your head, what muscles do you engage? It's your back, it's your shoulders, it's your arms. So you're engaging all those muscles. So make it part of a game. Like instead of even just handing them a treat, put it up. So they have to lift their arms over their head. That actually engages all of the back muscles and encourages structural stability in their body. So a lot of times we'll get kids who are coming into kindergarten who are still W sitting, which is when the feet are on the outside instead of on the inside. So not crisscross applesauce, they'll actually be behind them. So it's like kneeling, but with your feet out to the side behind you. And that's actually a way that kids adjust if they don't have a strong core strength. It provides them a nice wide base to perform activities, but it's just not good for their knees and not good for their hips, especially girls. So it really can sort of cause issues later on. So we want to correct that. But a way to work on that is to hand things over their heads because it strengthens those muscles just little by little. And those little teeny changes actually make a huge difference, especially at that young age. We see a lot of improvement very quickly. Any other questions? Like I said, I really can talk forever about this stuff.
Not specifically a question, but just so that it's out there. I think one of the things that helped me the most about starting with you guys, like my older son, we had the doctors putting off, oh no, his speech is fine. His speech is fine. Until suddenly he's 3.5 and they were like, oh, he's talking at a 2-year-old level.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that would have been helpful to know, before. So he was too old to go through Las Cumbres. So we had to start with the schools. My younger, we started way ahead. We started with you guys before he was a year old. And the transition to the schools was so much easier because I had you guys help navigating it. It was so when in doubt, start with Las Cumbres early because they will come to your meeting, your evaluations, or not, I don't know about evaluations, but the meetings and stuff. And you guys help, and you know our kids once we're there. And so that helps too.
Yeah, we do it. So we do a transition. If kids are still in services when they turn 3, we do a transition to the school district. So we arrange the meetings and we hand over all of our paperwork about, you know, their most recent evaluations. And then the school district does their own evaluation and takes over from there. Sometimes kids will qualify, sometimes they won't. The majority of kids will qualify, which is awesome. I'm a huge fan of the school district preschool program. They did a great job. It's small classrooms. It's really great for that stuff. So I'm a huge fan. So I'm always like, I'm a great cheerleader for all the early intervention stuff because my kids went through it. So, and my oldest is now 16, almost 17. So, and I'm like, I've been through this for a long time. But when he was going through it, like I had a very brave friend. So when my son was 2.5, I had a brave friend who was a speech therapist at Las Cumbres. And she was very brave to say, you need to have your son evaluated. Because I had been asking the doctor, same thing, saying, and they're like, oh no, we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. And I'm so glad we called it 2.5 because they were able to do a very quick transition to the school district when he turned 3. And it was pretty seamless and fairly easy. So that was actually quite the, you know, load and also to be validated, to be like, oh yes, actually these are concerns, you know. And so I always felt very validated by someone mentioning things that I had concerns about, but the doctors were sort of like, yeah, we'll wait and see. Because a lot of times kids will just pick up and they just get going and you know, they're just sort of holding off on that speech or holding off on things. And then all of a sudden it'll just click in. And we'll even get kids who come in and we'll be like, oh, this kid's going to be in and out. They're going to come in, we're going to get them on track and they're going to move on. And a lot of times, and then occasionally we'll get those kids where they come in and I'm like, oh, this kid's going to be in and out really quick. Well, then they actually don't. And they actually stay in longer and there might be an underlying speech issue like a tongue tie, or it could be an oral motor issue. So and you'll see it a lot with kids with like big mouths. Sorry, my kid has like a huge mouth and he had oral motor low tone in his mouth. So he didn't breastfeed. He didn't sucking on things was hard for him, and he drooled a lot. So that's another thing. That's another. If your kid drools a lot but isn't teething, that's a lot of times it's an open posture, and it's hard to do if you're it's just like when their bottom lip will just sort of hang open and they sort of walk around like that. It's called an open mouth posture, and they'll drool. That's mouth tone. And so that's when we encourage things like blowing. I always say blowing out a candle is a great one because kids want to blow out candles. They'll blow it out as many times as you light it. You know, so those are actually those muscles. Fun activities for speech development. One I actually tell parents is Snapchat. Snapchat is a great, fun way to like spend time with your kid. You use that forward-facing camera and you get them to make silly faces. The big mouth one is my favorite for language development because you can get them to make different silly faces. You can make videos and they love to watch themselves on videos. And it's a really fun, just a playtime for mom and baby, mom and kid to, you know, to do those activities together. Super huge fan of Snapchat for that. I actually am not anti-screen. I think there are appropriate, like I have apps that I recommend for parents. I have, if you don't want to sing Baby Shark 5 million times, it's okay if you want to put on the video for them. There will be no judgment from me. I'll tell you that. There's lots of videos that are very active. You know, if you have an active kid and you don't want to sing a song 12 million times, because if they get stuck on a song, sometimes you just can't do it. No judgment. I am a parent, been there. So I think screens are fine in moderation. You do. I'm not saying like babysit your kid with a screen, but there are times that it's actually very helpful during for development. And I can share those apps if anybody has questions.
Another random benefit of starting with you guys, even if it's close before they're going to turn 3, my younger guy started on his 3rd birthday at the public schools instead of once they turn 3, then they can get evaluated. You guys, going through you guys, the evaluation happens ahead of time instead of, oh, they're not 3 yet, we can't do anything.
Yeah, because a lot of times they say, oh, you can't call until after they're 3. But if we do it through us, we do our transition process actually 3 months before they turn 3 is when we start meeting with the school district. They start their evaluation process, and then they'll do the IEP, and then on their birthday they start services through the school district.
Yeah, it helps make everything seamless. It's really nice.
Any other questions? I really can go on and on, like pick a topic and I'll just.
When is the thing you have tomorrow, the sensory?
Oh, it's at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I'll actually put out the link probably on the LA Moms email list. And then, but I'll also share the, what's it called? We have a flyer for it that I'll share on the LA Moms on Facebook. They only want me to share like once a week on that stuff. So I'll share it tomorrow morning. And then right before it, like probably early morning. And then
Abbie, if you can share that with me for the Los Alamos Reporter, I can post it today. Yeah.
That would be great. Oh, I'm saying it's tomorrow, and I'm actually crazy because it's actually Friday. My brain is fried. It's not tomorrow.
This week is ridiculous. Friday. It's cool. Friday. Okay.
I wish it was Thursday. That would be nice. It's not. Yeah. So it's actually this Friday at 10 a.m. And I will share the link with you, Lucy, because we actually have already created the link for the Zoom meeting. You can also go on the Las Cumbres website, and there is a link for the meeting. And there's more information. And they have a recording of our last one, which is the gross motor with Jean Porteous, who is our pediatric physical therapist, and she's amazing. She has an amazing understanding of the human body. So if you missed the one 2 weeks ago on gross motor, that's another really great resource if you want to see me talk more, because I do that.
Anybody else have any questions for Abbie? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Abbie. Thank you for sharing. And just while I'm on here, this is kind of our first little kickoff. When we come back from spring break, we will be having our early intervention fair-ish in COVID times. It's not what it normally would be, but I will be doing interviews. I'm going to do a little interview with Abbie, and then with some folks from Las Cumbres, JJAB, and Firstborn, and with Cecily Keeler, the super awesome preschool teacher from the public schools. And so we will have all those things posted to kind of tie up our whole early intervention fair on Facebook. So
and to end things, I always say that the time to call is just when you have a question. That is the time to call. If you just have a question and you're just, because I always say trust your instincts as a parent, and just because a lot of times the doctors are like, oh, just wait, because I'll tell you, if we have a kid and we do an evaluation and they don't qualify, we love telling parents, this is a child who's on target. This child is doing great. We are, we're not worried about their development. Here are some ideas. those are actually really fun evaluations for us to do. We're happy to do one that where kids don't qualify. That's fine. If it's a kid who doesn't have any concerns, we're happy to put your mind at ease.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you so much, Abbie. And I'm gonna hit the end now. Thank you so much. And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to send them my way and I can easily connect you with Abbie. Thanks.